nice to see everybody so bright and early, and thanks to the panellists who I'll get to introduce themselves as we go into the first question. You have to have been living in a cave not to hear about AI at the moment, and we've probably all lived through many hype cycles in our long careers, but we are definitely in the middle of one at the moment. And I have a firm belief that it's people like us and it's a community like us that have to be the grown-ups in the room to be sensible, practical, and actually demonstrate some real life experience in terms of how to get value from AI and not be a kid in the sweet shop trying to treat it as a solution looking for a problem. So today I think you're going to hear a lot about governance, real life experience around analytics, leadership, and today's starting panel we're going to hear about what people are doing with AI and being ready. What does readiness look like for taking advantage of artificial intelligence in today's world? So we'll pass over to our panel and ask them to introduce themselves as they go into the first question. But I'll start off with Barry. Barry, where's John Lewis at the moment with the artificial intelligence agenda, and how are you looking and examining the readiness and fitness for JL?
Morning. I'm Barry. I'm the Chief Data Analytics Officer at the John Lewis Partnerships. That's John Lewis, Waitrose, FS, Build to Rent, and all the other stuff. And I also sit on the boards of Ofgem, the UK's energy regulator, and Reach, who own some national papers, Mirror, Star, Express, plus the regional news network, Manchester Evening News and Chronicle and stuff like that. John Lewis, you mentioned John Lewis, but I'm going to talk about Waitrose, actually, first. So the use cases in John Lewis and Waitrose are actually much more advanced than I thought they would be 3 years ago when I joined, because quite an old-fashioned retailer, we stick to the knitting. We tend not to overinvest in technology or governance or security. However, it's quite an easy case to make in a retailer when it's shipping physical product. So the job of a retailer is to buy stuff, move it, and then sell it for more than you bought it for. And that is some perfect AI use cases right there. So you're talking about pricing, promo, recommendations, the routing of the vans, staff rotas, how much bread to bake in each store. So we have got use cases driving the physical product around and putting it on the shelf, and we can measure it. And that's before you get into what probably the more sexy use cases, like the website recommendations, personalized recommendations, the carousel you see, substitutions on your shopping and all that stuff. The stuff that I get quite excited about and that I think we're doing a good job on are the operational use cases, the non-customer interaction ones. So I know we might talk about Gen AI, we're nowhere there, quite deliberately, I've not prioritized it. The stuff I care about and the stuff we're doing quite well on is when you can put a model live in production and you start seeing people buying stuff, or there's no gaps on the shelf. So those operational use cases are where we excel at the moment. On the other Gen AI, customer service stuff, we're probably a bit behind, but it's harder for me to take a business case for that. So I'm only getting stuff away where I can measure how many incremental sales or profit or less veg we're throwing away, because that all counts in a grocery business where margin is low single figures.
That's a great point on measurement. I think we'll touch on that in a moment. Kate, do you want a very different organisation? Kate, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're at with the AI implementation?
So I'm Kate Boyle. I head up data services at a company called the Police Digital Services. My job is to work with 43 forces to make sure they're doing data correctly. We're not doing AI in policing. You can understand why. So for my job is to make sure that the data is correct for operational policing. That's amalgamating huge data sets. And once we get there and I can build data products to support those forces, then we get into the sexy stuff like the NLP, child exploitation, what can we find out from, systems and how that's being done. But we are not ethically in a place to embed any kind of AI. We're just, the public trust isn't there, and I don't think it should be there at the moment. So, but we do have forces running at it, and they are trying to get sexier in what they're doing, and we've got to establish those ethics across the police forces at the moment.
Great
It's
stuff.
a tough gig.
Absolutely. And Roshan, what about Sky?
So just as an intro, so I'm Rosh Awatar. So I run all things data analytics across all our geographies. So that's UK, Germany, Italy, across Sky Residential. So there's products that you see in terms of our satellites, our Sky Protect, Sky Mobile, as well as our streaming business, which is now TV. And a bit like Barry, I think we're quite well progressed in terms of operational use cases and what we call traditional machine learning. Everyone's heard, hyper-personalization, personalized marketing. If you think about dynamic pricing, looking at churn, such a commercial organization, retaining our customers is key. So call forecasting into call centers, churn modeling, all that stuff, it's like BAU for us. But over the last few months, obviously, the Gen AI hype, that's flipped it a little bit. We've already got AI in the product. I mean, my little daughter uses the voice remote every day now. She's only 5 years old, right? We've got AI built into the product. But now with Gen AI, that's like AI everywhere in terms of that concept. So this year's been quite focused on experimentation and learning because it's still quite relatively new. We don't know exactly how far this can go. A lot of the, I guess, commercial benefits are still being analysed and understood. So I'm almost fully on that off-premise and on GCP platform. So that has really allowed us to get going quite quickly in terms of experimentation. So I've got a whole data scientist hub, right? I'm the main, one of my teams is a hub across all countries. And that's made it easy for us just to get our hands dirty, right? Quite safely, just experiment around, things that we're looking at viewing behaviors. We look at productivity, right? Productivity is one of the key things that we can look at, and it's relatively safe because it's internal. So a lot of the time has been working with the business to understand those opportunities and what are the guardrails and boundaries that we need to put in place, because it was very clear Gen AI has excited everyone. I've not seen so many people want to get involved, including the business. So for us, it's been forming the right teams, cross-functional teams from technology, compliance, business, data. That's taken quite a while just to get everyone in the same room, in the right level of governance, and creating over 200 lists of use cases, which we're never going to do, like 200. But at least we know what is the art of the possible. So that's been a lot of prioritization, and then now trying to build, what are the POCs we go for? And what are we willing to invest, right, and build some proper foundation to support Gen AI going forward? Because it's very easy to do POCs, but if you don't know how you're going to productionize, how much it's going to cost to scale and run in BAU, that is really, really important. So we're on that part of the curve in terms of, or that part of the journey in terms of coming out of experimentation, now thinking about the early 2 or 3 use cases that we're going to productionize, but we're not rushing all gung-ho into everything because everything's changing. Even when it comes to suppliers, we're thinking about, what is the right supplier? I'm on Google right now. But for example, actually, could you build a base where actually you can use any LLM from any cloud provider? So even technology-wise, architecture-wise, we're trying to figure out what is the best reusable architecture to implement. So it's really we've just been getting our head straight, getting things in order, getting the right people aligned, and actually getting the exec completely aligned, because everyone comes in with their own views, opinions and thoughts, and I've never seen so many Gen AI experts come out of the woodwork in a matter of 3 months. But that's where we are, early in the journey, but I'd say progressing quite well.
Thank you, Raj. And David, what about you?
Hello everyone, I'm Dave. I'm Chief Technology and Data Officer at Apex, Apex being one of the largest fund management and asset wealth management organisations in the world. We're in a completely different setting and strategy. Right from the outset when I've come in, and I've only been there for 3 or 4 months now, is to top line that strategy in terms of where that business needs to be and where we need to be as an organisation. In terms of AI and general kind of ML and analytical journey, it's quite a difficult one across 40 different jurisdictions, 40 different businesses, 40 different countries with economic growth and economic backdrop that is very volatile, very turbulent. So how to put and how we place the whole AI piece and ML piece is really key. We're in the first footings of setting up and standing up the teams. We're ready for the data science capability. We're ready for the ML journey. And we are building that infrastructure. We do have unfortunately, a different kind of case to Sky, where we have a whole fragmented structure of on-prem 3 different cloud-based servers, and we've got a whole kind of, I suppose, mishmash of technologies out there. So the journey right now is stabilisation ready for the AI movement. And AI has been around in the organisation in different parts for a very long time. It's more now how we exploit the AI, how we exploit ML, how we can benefit across the FS markets, across the different jurisdictions, and really build that stabilisation pattern across, places that have very difficult economic backdrops from an asset wealth management perspective, from an FS perspective, how we stabilise into, the 7 banks that we own, and how we can then use the AI effectively. From a governance and controls perspective, it's absolutely key that we do that, in a very ethical manner, in a very structured way, to be able to switch it on, to prove it, to test it, and to make sure that that's sufficient in those environments. So yeah, it's very, very much an evolution, a strategic journey.
Thank you, David. So Sam, I think we've got 4 good examples there of very early stages in this process and in this hype curve in terms of what the 4 organisations are doing. I was going to do a quick show of hands, actually. So give 4 examples of early stages. How many others, show of hands, would describe their own organisations at the very early stages of the AI? Okay, 2/3 of the room. Interesting. So let's move on. So we had ethics, experimentation, value, all mentioned there. I'm interested in what each of your organisations, or just a guidance on how do you assess the readiness for AI adoption. What you might not be there yet, but what foundations are you putting in place? And Kate, I've come to you first. You talked about you not being able to go there for obvious reasons in the police, but around ethics, around governance, around data quality. What kind of steps have you taken to get ready for when it might happen?
So I think there's a massive emphasis on the culture across policing. We're dealing with operational police officers that have a really, really tough day job. Their process of logging data and managing data is just not there, and why should it be? So that's why we need to come through and help them. So we've got some really clear standards coming through, some clear definitions. If you talk to forces about their data quality and what their data means, they don't understand. They want to talk to me about data privacy. That's all they care about, because they're legally processing data and they understand that. So my job is very much to focus on the definitions, the governance, the standards, making sure that all works, and bringing them together in understanding that culture and how we're going to drive data for the greater good. If we look at policing, after their people, data is the biggest asset policing has. They just can't tap it at the moment.
Interesting. And Barry, what about yourselves?
It's all about the value for us again. So I'm a bit of a broken record here, but when we were all at Lloyds Banking Group together, it's a different vibe. Stay out of prison. Everyone understood that. I was under the SMR, so that's a very real possibility. So it was quite easy to make people understand the value of data ownership and yawn. But in FS, you have to know that, otherwise you're not fit and proper. However, it's different when you're selling wooden spoons and dresses and hummus, which is what I do now. And no one cares. No one actually cares about data quality or data management. What they care about is what's stopping them optimizing revenue or profit. So therefore, if someone searches, 3 years ago, if you'd have gone onto the John Lewis website and searched for a tennis ball, the first thing that would have come up on your search was a Dyson Hoover. That's a metadata problem. And if you'd have searched for a size 12 red dress, you would have got all the UK size 12 red dresses, but some red dresses are US or European sizes, and they wouldn't have shown up. And for every 1% improvement in findability, you get a big double-digit million sales growth. So by running very quick tests online and showing people that if your metadata isn't correct, you're not going to sell this much. This is the impact. You run the tests and you say, guess what? Those red dresses that you thought were a terrible buy by the fashion department are just not coming up in the search. When they come up, they're selling. You're not reducing them at the end. They're not taking up warehouse space, etc., etc., etc. They care about it. So if someone who's buying brand A of television is capturing it inches, and someone who's buying brand B of television is capturing it in centimetres, and then there's some mistake by half an inch or half a centimetre and it doesn't fit in, that's a return. So we actually, it's not trivial. We're not trivialising it, we're just making it real. And then that's the gateway into, well, do you know, if you're the fashion buyer, you own size. You know, that's a data element. So decide, is everything normalising to a UK size or not? And if it is, we'll do that for you, and you just need to check it. So we can do quick testing digitally and make people feel the pain of when the data's not right. And if they don't want to fix it, then that's a revenue risk that they're carrying on their bit of the P&L, which we can then declare. I haven't got the power to make them stop anything, but I can go to the exec and say, things must be going very well if you know you're giving away this many sales, just because someone's not capturing the data properly or updating Calibra with the definition or so on. So again, it has to all be about the revenue in retail. It's a very different vibe to when I was in banking.
Fascinating, thank you. Dave?
Well, I'm still in banking, and I've always been in banking. I was at Lloyd's as well, head of risk at Lloyd's. Yeah, it's a very tangible effect, poor data quality. It hits the balance sheet and the P&L pretty quickly. And there's different assessments that we run, different assessments that you can run from an FS business perspective. And that is, how hard that the MD comes down and screams at you in terms of how much money you've lost because of those things. And like Barry, tools like Calibra, like data lineage platforms, like Nafos and other kind of providers can give you that insight into how well structured your master data looks like, how well the data lineage is working across the different products and services that you're providing. From our perspective, working again, 40 businesses, 40 jurisdictions, 40 countries, with 1,000 platforms, 1,000 different kind of use cases almost in different businesses. That is a big task and a big data challenge. Both from a lineage perspective, but also actually use cases. What are we actually doing with data? Which is first and foremost, from a strategic point of view, what is the use case of data? How are we going to drive it through the business? How much money does it make? Data as an asset, data as a service, data as governance. All those different things need to be considered when we look at the tangible effects of data and poor data quality. And it's an evolution, it's a journey. Trying to solve the entire data journey or the whole data issue is not a 5-minute job, and you can't do it all at once. So it's very much breaking that down into the different components of products and services that you can provide, different aspects of balance sheet impact, and then hitting that, at the biggest quick wins as you possibly can. Certainly from my perspective, from an FS perspective, yeah. And keeping people out of jail, of course, as Barry points out. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. And the customer-centric Sky, how are you getting on there at Roche?
Right. So it's similar themes here. So not doing data for data's sake. I mean, that's one of the key things, because it's, why should we be doing this? What's broken? We're still making money. So it's about, what do you go for? So one of the key things that we've made sure that we do is we find delivery vehicles to implement good data management. Because delivery vehicles meaning, I might build a customer 360 engine. It'll have profile, it'll have a business case, it'll have value attached, and everyone's sponsoring it. So people says, absolutely. And you can attach that to actually, well, if it goes wrong, what can happen? Versus, I'm going to go and document the hell out of all my data estate, put thresholds and controls over all my systems. I'm like, okay, that's nice. Where's your 15 million quid gone over the last 3 years? So it's really that incremental value release as we go along. So that's going to be key, because it's the nature of Sky's organisation is very dynamic. It's very, very commercial. So everything is a value-based decision. And it's quite difficult in the absence of strong regulators, right? PRA, FCA coming on to you saying you have to do it, right? But this is very much the carrot and the influence, because I guess financial service it's a blessing and a curse. When I flip from financial services to non-financial, it's great, but then sometimes you think, I'd love to have a policy that everyone's just says, let's just do data management. But actually, no, you've got to find the hooks that everybody clings onto. So yeah, it's similar based things to everyone else.
Great stuff. So a lot of talk about value there, which is a nice segue into the next area. and I might start with Kate as well, because I'd be really interested to see how the police measure value. I'm sure you do. But I mean, I must say that even my time at Pets and Royal Mail, we were very value driven. We almost had the metaphorical Blue Peter thermometer that tracked the amount of value we delivered back in pounds, shillings and pence, which was a great door opener to most conversations you want to try and do in the investment around data and AI. But Kate, how's that done at the police?
So we're not tracking value money. We save lives and we protect lives. So I think that's where our value comes in. One of my use cases at the moment, if for every 999 call that comes into the police, have 3 minutes to ascertain what's going on in that incident. And some of those forces in those control and command rooms have to go through 7 different sets of data. And they don't get there in time. So the officers are walking through a front door, and retrospectively they're told, we already knew that guy had a machete that he came with you at. If we'd got to the data quick enough, we could have told you that. So that's where my value is coming through, is those solid use cases. What can we do for violence against women and girls? What can we do for race action? What can we do for command and control, county lines? That's where our value is going to come out, helping those officers do their job much better with the insights that we can provide them.
So clearly more purpose driven than financial.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from the other 3 organisations.
Yeah, well, they're all about the money.
Relatively speaking. So chaps, you obviously mentioned value quite a lot there in terms of how you help prioritise and which use case to go after and absolutely get people's attention. In terms of tracking, or in terms of some anecdotes as to some of the big wins that you've seen, or some of the biggest dissenting voices that you've managed to convince as a result of the value that you've delivered. Do you want to tackle that and build on what you've already said around value? Dave, do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from an OPEX perspective, we see it in stocks and shares. If we've got poor data quality and we're not delivering value on a 500 million hedge fund, we see it on the FTSE 100 and we see it on the stocks overnight. On a 5 trillion business, that's a huge impact. And you can get lost very quickly in that kind of scenario. So it's all about breaking it down into the tangible components of what you're trying to drive. It comes back to the use cases. It always comes back to the strategic vision of the business, regardless of whether it's Apex or Lloyds or HSBC or whatever it is. It's all about understanding where your data needs you to go from a business perspective, whether your diversification on your business growth, or whether it's organic growth, or whether it's acquisitional growth. You need to break it down into, we break it down into the small chunks, the small incremental value adds that data can bring you. Because if you look always at that top level, you just get lost really quickly. So it's just breaking it down into tangible effects and be able to track it, through many tools.
Thank you, Roche.
Yeah, in terms of top level themes, usually about revenue, efficiency, risk, customer experience. Those are the sorts of terminology we always use. You can bucket all value. But, at the more granular level, you think about, cost to serve for us, cost to serve the customer, and actually number of customers coming in terms of revenue. And we partner with any data science model that I put to production, we partner with finance to actually validate a number. So end of every year, I put a financial number against every single piece of model and output. And whether it's looking at, has it impacted churn rate, looking at NPV, looking at CLV, all of these things that the execs understand, right? It's less of a convince, it's factual. Because previously it's been quite difficult when you think, the power of data and what it could do. I've got tangible numbers that the CFO's team has stamped and said, your team has generated 100 million last year that we can validate. They've saved it, or they've helped us acquire this many customers. And model by model, that is something that I found really, really powerful, that there's just no convincing. Like anyone that looks at the team says, that's the value team. Right, so that's the pivot between defense and offense. So in the background, we're doing data management stuff that are they'll only care if something goes wrong. They won't care if you're doing it right. The only thing that they see is you're providing valuable, we can hang our hats on.
Thank you. And Barry?
We measure 2 things, revenue or CSAT, CSAT stroke NPS. So the CSAT MPS one is more indirect, right? And you have to get into some quite complex drivers analysis to understand the reasons. And there's somewhat of a leap of faith required to say that data has enabled those metrics. I don't even attempt to say for every 0.1 of MPS going up equals X million. Like you just have to believe that personalization and no empty shelves and the right staffing is helping store experience or whatever. But as Ross said, the other side is we won't put any, we're talking about AI model, live on our MLOps platform unless the business owner of that part of the business, so whether it's grocery or online or whatever, has booked that benefit into their financials that year. So if they've got to show the faith and say, yeah, that's a 2 million saving or that's a 12 million upside from this model, finance, rubber stamp it, and then we're on the hook to deliver it. If they're like, well, we're not sure, let's just try it, I won't do it. If they just want PowerPoint, I won't do it. If my teams are doing interesting PowerPoint, we were making a mistake. I'm not interested. So we have to do the model, book it in through finance, and then it's tracked. I don't track it, finance track it. And of course, we can test these things, whether in a physical store estate, you can do some mirror stores and see what's going on, or if it's online, it's very easy to run small or big A/B tests. So it's all very tangible. That does mean that we're probably passing up some value where people don't believe and they don't want to book it. But I've learned the hard way that it's not my job to convince them. Like they'll see the success elsewhere, and demand is always going to outstrip supply. So I'm not going to go around begging them. I think the doability is just as important as the value, and the more you get away, the more momentum you build. It's like pushing a car. No one believed it because it's really hard, slow. And then once you get the momentum, it really gets going. But the relationship with finance is something that earlier on in my career, I didn't give a crap about, and I suffered because you're constantly asking people to just believe that it's doing a good thing. That's not good enough. So you really need to put the hours in with finance to get them to understand what the model's doing, how that's showing up. It could be reducing food wastage. It could be reducing the petrol the vans use, or it might be incremental sales of soft fruits before, all that stuff. You've got to go there with the finance people, the commercial finance people.
Great stuff, agreed. I'm going to ask one more question, but we're probably going to try and open the floor up to questions that you can ask the panel following this area. So the final area I wanted to just explore, and given that you kind of all at the very early stages or nowhere with the Gen AI approach and use cases, is how you're going about managing risk. So obviously lots of talk around bias, around mistakes, around ethics. How are your organisations kind of going into those sorts of things open-eyed, and some of the mitigations that are becoming more apparent now? I'll just open the floor actually if anyone wants to go first.
I'll go if you want. Give a few minutes. We listen to our customers. That's where it's going to turn up for us. Either they'll tell us that they don't like something, or we'll see it in the numbers. So unlike banking, where the risk committees were very detailed and we understood the potential impacts and we're kind of rating them, the impact of mistakes that we make aren't as grave as you would make. And therefore, I think we can just suck it and see a little bit. And if customers are like, I don't want to use the WhatsApp thing to return my toaster when it's broken, or whatever it is, and we'll just turn it off. There are certain things that can tip a use case into profitability or not profitability, and that's how I'll describe a risk. So for example, on a green van, a John Lewis two-person green van, so you're something big you're getting delivered, all it takes is for one item on that van to be returned and the whole van is unprofitable. So we think about metrics like that. It's usually because a washing machine doesn't fit in a slot, because things are rounded to the nearest half a centimetre and people would like to have it nice and flush. So if you've ever sent a washing machine back, you've made a whole van unprofitable. So we talk about customer metrics for risk, which is something I've never really done before. Regulatory-wise, this data breach and ICOs type stuff that we worry about, and that's really important, but CISO's concern, you know. So I might be the data owner, but it's on the CRM teams and so on to make sure they've got controls in place, just like everyone else. You know, our financial service business at the moment is white labelled, so really we can just try stuff out and see what the customers think. I mean, we have got some Gen AI use cases out there, and they're really cool and quite fun. So the biggest risk that we run is pissing our customers off and losing sales. And if I do something that does that and I don't catch it quickly, then I'm in trouble. But that's what we do. So I have the social listening team and the qual and quant research team. When you have the little survey that comes up after your shopping, you know, we get all of that, and we're analysing that really bloody quickly to see if anything's happening in the customers.
Great stuff. Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, I'll start on the other end in terms of the Gen AI lens, because I say that a lot of this year we've been looking at guardrails and controls and, you know, pen testing on GCP, looking at the LLMs, because it was a bit of an unknown. Like, we've been doing AI and machine learning for quite some time, so policies and principles and bias, you know, we use model cards, right? What Google used, you know, just to make sure that we're building the models the right way, building in, you know, fairness and transparency into it. But Gen AI is just a little bit different because the scale of impact is broad. So for us, it's a bit about human in the loop, right? So it's going to be use case by use case, starting internal usually, because that's the risk that you can manage internally, and looking at, well, what are the decisions you are going to be making, and what's the worst thing that can happen? So for example, if you have an enterprise knowledge search internally using Gen AI, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Well, it depends, right? If you're looking at all your HR policies, you get HR policy wrong, right? So bit by bit, I think we're building out the confidence. You know, once you start getting going on some of the low risk use cases, then we'll start building confidence and building it out. But for now, it'll definitely, for customer facing, right, human in the loop for sure, right? We don't, because humans are allowed to make a mistake, machines aren't, right? And that's going to be a fact, and that's going to be for quite some time. So we're just bearing that in mind, because it only takes us to, you know, release one customer facing thing to go wrong, and our Gen AI is no good, AI is no good, and we'll defeat all the progress that we've made so far. So we're, you know, taking it bit by bit, but also we're part of Comcast in the States, massive company. So we've got the power of themselves as well to leverage and collaborate across Comcast, Cable, NBC, Universal, Sky. So we've got, you know, the brains across all of those organizations coming together, and we're trialing out things in different places. And so we're all informing, well, what does good look like in terms of making sure we don't have bias, making sure that we're safeguarded. And to your point, you know, privacy, everyone cares about the privacy angle versus, the privacy angle and breaches. So everyone's coming together, CISO, technology, data, legal counsel, all of those. Is the first time with Gen AI that I see everyone coalescing around the same topic literally every week. So
Thanks.
that's what we are.
Kate, you've obviously made it clear that you're not starting that journey for obvious reasons, but do you think there'll be a time when you will, and how far into the future do you think that'll be? And are you working with any big tech to try and overcome some of the obvious challenges?
So that's really my job. You know, I'm supporting policing, but my job is to bring through the opportunity versus the risk. I just want to make it clear, I'm not responsible for any of the police data breaches that have happened this year. I want to be really clear about that. But my job is now to say, you know, these breaches are happening and keep happening because you've got no controls over your data, and you're not doing it at a national level. And because 43 forces do it a different way, you're losing every opportunity to automate, to make those controls work for you. So let's bring in the tech to help that. The trouble is you've got such a massive tech landscape across policing, all using different records management systems, and we're seeing the effect of that with the breaches. You know, what happened in police with Police Northern Ireland was just down to an individual that hadn't been trained correctly and impacted, you know, thousands of police officers' lives. So it's those controls that we've really got to get them through. And once they've got them through, then we can start looking at that automation journey and how we can use that AI to change it.
Great stuff, thank you. And Dave, finally?
It scares me to death, to be perfectly honest. So I was responsible for risk at Lloyds and HSBC previously. So I've come from a risk and finance background, I'm an FD as well, that kind of moved into data. So I'm kind of on the fence. So this is all where the data governance structure falls into place. Having really good, solid data governance structures, guardrails, understanding regular catch-ups, having the infrastructure in place to be able to measure your defensive versus offensive data sets, understanding the materiality of both where you can afford to be more risky with data based on country, based on product, based on segment, based on a whole number of different factors, and really go through it in a gentle way. You know, I can't say enough, certainly from an FS perspective, that if you get it wrong, if we get it wrong, it's going to have a big material impact on potentially a country, on an economy, on communities. So understanding that materiality of how that, and not so much the ML, it's more the Gen AI piece, how that would, you know, to take Roshan's point, the human in the loop. It's when you start taking that human out of the loop, it gets to a point where you need really, really well thought out robotic processes, really well thought out testing plans, really well thought out understanding of how it's going to affect your business in what strategic direction. You know, there's a, you know, written a paper recently around AI hallucinations and the different kind of AI outputs of programs that can tell you completely the wrong information based on your data quality. So once you've got your data quality in a good position, then you can start that AI journey in very strategic ways. Because, you know, if you do get it wrong, then it can have a big material effects. So it's all about understanding that, you know, the underlying approach of what you need to do and really test it on both sides of the fence. Customer last, internal first. But again, from an internal perspective, if we're testing it on things like payroll, you know, if you muck up payroll because of a Gen AI, then it's, you know, it's going to go wrong very quickly. So it's taking those use cases really well.
Thank you very much. Look, I'll quickly run to a couple of questions if I can. Oh, there's two hands up straight away. So, Adam, do you want to go first?
Question for Kate. I would say somebody asked me who was an early adopter of AI a while ago. I would have said the police, because of, if depending on your definition of computer vision, with NPR, automatic number plate recognition, the anti-terrorism stuff, and the height of the IRA using models to work out where people would panic through stadiums. It was pioneering stuff back then. What do you think has changed? And is it just the definition? Because one of the things I might ask the panel is, what is your definition of AI? Because it gets broadened all the time. All of a sudden, machine learning is now in AI, and it didn't used to be. So I'll go back to the original question. What changed, you think, in the police?
Exactly what you just said. They're confusing themselves on the definitions. That's my belief. You know, I spoke to somebody the other week who was, you know, really insistent they wanted AI across policing, and proceeded to tell me that our AI is real information, so why aren't we using it? And I'm like, no, you've got the wrong definition. They ask me constantly for AI, what they actually mean is machine learning. And so I think there's a lack of culture and a lack of understanding across policing, and you're right, there are some brilliant examples. If we go back to Find and Search, you know, they're doing a really important, they call it cuckooing. They're trying to understand where criminals are going to appear next. Most of their cameras are in the North Atlantic because they've not worked on the data. They're just looking at the intel that's coming through. And they've got to do that. They've got a tough job. But now it's about making sure that the data is doing what they need it to do for the right outcomes with the right intel.
And your definition?
I'll keep it simple. Trying to mimic human behaviour.
Yeah.
That's my.
I think in the broadest sense,
that's it.
I think the broadest sense of the word artificial intelligence and all its flavours, with one current flavour taking all the headlines at the moment. But I think what we've heard today is that the traditional is still the one that's most effective at the moment, certainly more proven. Certainly my take. I'm just conscious of time as well, Adam, so I'm just trying to get to that question at the back as well. Hi.
Thank you for your responses so far. My question is around data computation localization. So far, GDPR and local laws like UK data protection laws enable or ask you to store data locally, right? But when it comes to AI, we're talking about computation, and often these models reside in one location but utilize data from multiple geographies, for instance, right? I'm asking to understand whether there is any need for the governments to then start saying, yes, you can desensitize data and anonymize it, but is it useful for us to enforce data computation with localization so that whether your data, if it's like sensitive, I don't know how much you can desensitize it, it needs to be within one geography and you can only apply models in that particular geography to run your AI computation. Do you see the pros and cons to this, and what are your thoughts around it?
Well, I'll probably say, because I'm on GCP at the moment, and we've asked that question as well in terms of, residency of not just the data but the models, and being quite risk averse at the moment. It's like I'll only be comfortable, or will only be comfortable, if you're going to be processing on a local node or something in the EU, as an example. But I think that's going to become, again, as it evolves, more and more of a topic, because it's, again, goes back to the LLMs, right? Whether it's an LLM or anything else on your cloud platform, we should ask the same question, right? So, and I think all this is doing is just accelerating, getting the answer, and actually heightening people's nervousness, sometimes for no reason, right? So, because Gen AI is just, it's just another version of AI. We could already be processing somewhere else, as an example. Does Gen AI change whether we should be more scared or less scared, whether it's done locally or processed somewhere else? I think that's, for me, it's just a watching brief. I don't know if you've got any experience.
Well, they're similar. Well, we're a UK company, but the way that we hold our data, so we're on GCP, but I put all my data in Snowflake. But other platforms are available. But one of the reasons I like Snowflake is that the data by default is really masked and locked down, and the control you can have over it, the clean rooms we can set up, the data sharing across clouds is really, really tightly controlled. I find that gives me a lot of comfort, because I have people looking at where our data is and who's looking at it. We can't just be bringing in data from APIs here and everywhere. We use the data sharing capability of the Snowflake platform, so we can really, really control and understand it. Mainly for the processing points, mainly for PPI, and mainly for financial services, small financial services products. But we try and build it into the architecture to enable us to monitor it. And that's why I put the extra step in between GCP into Snowflake. I found that I had less control when people were using BigQuery. So I've turned that off completely.
And I've actually done the same.
All the best.
So again, yeah. So Snowflake. So as we've got a real issue with the data processing across, especially places like Luxembourg, where there's very, very, very strict guardrails from a data perspective, and it's how we can utilise that data, because we need to, as a business. So it's how can you safely utilise that data without breaking the law, within a kind of very small confine. So use cases like Snowflake is very good to be able to do that. But then, using ML and scripts over the back of that, you can not get around laws, but you can certainly utilise those data sets safely and legally. So it's okay. Again, it's come back to use case of what you're trying to do, as an organisation.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so we'll draw a line under it there, and to say, I talked about grown-ups at the beginning of the session, and I think we've had 4 very insightful and realistic, pragmatic, honest sets of experiences as it stands at the moment, in terms of just scratching the surface. So I'd like to thank all of 4 panellists for their wisdom, and look forward to seeing you throughout the day. Thanks.
Thank you.